Call the meeting to order. Are we properly posted?
Meeting's been noticed according to law.
Roll call, please.
President Johnson.
Here.
Clerk, sorry. Trustee Harding. Commissioner Hayes.
Here.
Commissioner Moraz. Commissioner Olson. Here.
We got a speaker problem. Test 1, 2. That's better. Okay. All right, we'll do citizen participation. I don't think any of you want to, you're all here for something on the agenda, so I'm not going to read this then unless you guys really want to do something during citizen participation. Okay, we'll skip citizen participation. On to approval of minutes, July 14th, 2025.
I'll second it.
All right, motion and second. Questions or discussion? You're going to abstain, I guess. You weren't here. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? And one abstention. Okay. Ordinance and code amendments. Item 1, amend the general development plan for 2931 Union Street Plan Development District for property located at 2931 Union Street to allow general office, personal or professional services, church activities, and or a commercial kitchen in the portion of the church/school building that was previously used for church/fellowship hall activities, and to allow retail sales and church activities in the portion of the church/school building previously used for a parochial school. Main floor, second floor, and lower level, Steve Lambrecht's application 2025-16. So I will open the public hearing. Oren, you want to give us the rundown?
Yes. So I tried to explain in my staff review some of the things that have taken place since the last time this was before the Plan Commission. If you can remember back to February of this year, there was an approval to amend the plan development to allow, in addition to the retail sales that were going on in the former church, to also allow that in the fellowship hall area. And then there was also the request to allow the personal and professional services uses in the school portion on all levels of the school portion of the building. So again, that took place back in February. That did get approved. Since that time, the retail tenant on the church side of the development, the Wilted Rose, has vacated the premises, and so that space is available. The property owner, Mr. Lambrechts, has a church in the queue that would like to lease that portion of the building. And they're also interested in some of the upper level of the former school for their youth ministry. The ultimate goal would be that if they are successful, they would purchase the building. So that's the main part of the current request. The other part of the current request would be to add some other uses in those areas as well, the church side and the school side, to just provide more overall flexibility to be able to, fill the spaces that aren't filled yet. And so that's where you get the request for the retail on the school side, in addition to the things that are already allowed over there, and the addition of some other uses on the church side in addition to what's already allowed there. But the only current tenant that's proposed is the church use. Another thing that happened since the last time that this was before the Plan Commission, the village approved a new parking layout for Clark Street. And I have in your packets the minutes and the site plan that went to the village board and received approval. This was something that was approved in June, and overall, a number of new spaces in front of the former church school property to provide a space for the tenants. You know, our discussions previously about the personal and service uses were that those could generate potential traffic. Most of those are on an appointment basis. But now there's this nice angled parking. So the picture that's up on the screen was from a site visit that I made just after a plan commission meeting, just to see, how many people were out there. And you can see that there's about 4 people parking there at that time, just on that random spot check. So overall, I think that helps the area. And one of those is an accessible stall, which you can see in the foreground of that picture. The current request, one of the things to keep in mind is still just this parking, even with the addition of this. If we add new uses, there is no off-street parking associated with this adaptive reuse of this building. There never has been any on-site parking associated with this use at this site. And so if the tenant mix changes and we add new uses, there could be situations where it is busier than what we see now, but we don't know. It just depends on who's there and how it's being used. So that could be, again, a church on one half and potentially other tenants in other spaces on the school portion. And it could be the church and somebody else on the church half. So we don't know if it's always going to be full, and so I'm just pointing out in the staff review to keep that in mind when considering the requested uses and mix of uses. The last thing that occurred since the last time this was before the commission, the monument sign that was in your packets last time has been installed, and you can see that in the picture that's up there, and there's a more zoomed in picture of it as well. So the petitioner is here if there are specific questions from the Plan Commission. And I'd be happy to help try to answer any questions as well.
Go ahead.
I guess my question is how big is this church going to be? How many members are they going to have? And what are they going to do with the parking? Because the residents are already upset about the parking.
Well, we're trying to restore it to what it was for 100 years, which was a church. His goal is to have between 35 and 50 members. That includes kids as well, and that's why he wants to take over the 4 offices upstairs for the youth ministry and have the church portion for the adults. And then the lower level, they want to do, because it's already there's already, when we purchased the building, there was an existing kitchen down there, which they would use for their potluck dinners and that type of thing. So they would like to have permission to do that because we changed that to retail down there. So that's the reason for the request of that. As far as parking, I included in there, with this approval of this, every space will be leased in the building. And there will be the upper level, and the church and the fellowship hall will only be utilized on Sundays. So there won't be much parking during the week utilizing the church space. That will all be utilized using the personal and professional services, which again, I have included in your thing. There's essentially 4 personal and professional services operating there: a hairdresser, massage, a tattoo, and a personal trainer, and they all are requiring their customers to make appointments. So there is going to be no random 10 cars pulling up waiting in line for these places. They're all appointments that are an hour in length. I drive by that at least twice a day, and there's 13 spots there, and I have yet to see more than 6 or 7 of them filled at one time. And like I say, this was a church for 100 years, and parking on the street was never an issue then, and I'm hoping it's not going to be now. I'd be happy to answer questions.
So I know a majority of churches have also a midweek service, usually on Wednesdays. Are they doing that?
As far as I know, he's not. And maybe when he builds a congregation bigger, that's a possibility, but as of right now, it is not.
Okay, so I'm assuming that when services are going on with the church, that all the other businesses, since it's like a Sunday, they're probably going to be closed.
Correct.
So it's all going to be one or
I
the
don't know
other.
of any of those that have Sunday hours. The only possibility would be the personal trainer might have somebody with a Sunday morning appointment, but that way, he does not drive there. He lives right around the corner. He walks there, so that would be one additional car.
So I guess to go along with the whole parking issue, I think my big concern is what happens if they start doing a midweek service and then you have the 50 people coming plus whatever appointments are there also.
Well, to my knowledge, the hair salon, the massage, those are all done during the day. There is no evening of any of those people. They're all working from basically 8 till 4 o'clock type of thing, maybe a 5 o'clock late appointment, but I don't believe there's any evening going on in there. I've never seen it anyway. So I think with those 13 spots that are there, plus the 2 horizontal or the parallel ones, plus the parking that was existing on Union, I don't think parking's a problem. I don't see that there's going to be one person per car coming to church. Right? If there's 13 spots there and 3 or 4 people in a car, that's it. So.
Steve, so it sounds like the church, as you said, if they're successful, they've expressed an interest in purchasing the property from you.
They have. They're part of, and I'm learning this, they're part of another church organization that these churches all work together to help fund each other. So when they reach a certain congregation level of 35, right, then they can operate. And I think when they reach a congregation of 50, then they purchase the building. And that is what was expressed to us. So whether that's going to take 6 months or a year, we're not sure. But he has first right of refusal on the building.
So I don't know if this is a question for you, Steve, or for Orrin, but let's say that happens. We've done this planned development district here. How does that ownership change anything that we've approved already or might approve tonight? You know, how does that work?
The ownership is likely something that could trigger its own need for an update. That's common language in a conditional use permit. It's something that can be limited to that. And so if the general development plans are all approved to your ownership entity, Steve, then a new owner would probably have to get their own approval. At that point, I think one of the things to think about would also be the nonprofit status. Is all of the building untaxable at that point? If they have tenants, I don't think that's the case. If the tenants are staying, I think that portion would still be taxable, but I'm not your, assessor. That would be a question for them. So, but that would be a thought that we would have to look into.
That was my next question / thought, so, okay, thank you. Any other questions for Orrin or Steve from the commission? Since we had a large turnout for citizen participation, it is a public hearing. I have to ask, any comments for the public hearing? Second time, any public comments? Third time, any public comments? Okay, seeing none and hearing none, I will close the public hearing. Item B, discussion and recommendation to the village board based upon what we've heard.
I'm sorry, I got another question.
Okay, go ahead.
So since June, when we approved this, I know we got a few letters about parking from the neighbors. Have we got any others since then?
I don't think there were no other letters or comments in the record because this was publicly noticed.
No, and again, I included those minutes from the plan commi, or the village board meeting, rather, from when this was discussed. I don't know if there was neighbor input at that point. I know there was, there were a couple meetings that item was talked about.
Yeah, so, to what was in the packet, there was a couple of meetings where the village board gave direction to staff. There was some public comment. And really, the discussion was mostly, well, it was two things. One, about taking angled parking all the way, or sorry, not just angled parking, but, angled parking all the way down to Main Street, which we, based on public comment, we decided not to do. And then there was a lot of discussion about visibility of coming up to that stop sign, which was kind of outside the scope of what we were trying to do because the visibility was not great to begin with, right? So that was kind of really outside of what we were trying to look at. Since we put in the angled parking, I personally have not received any calls or emails. One individual had emailed me before we approved what got put in. They were concerned about angled parking all the way down. I said, what about this as an alternative? And I never heard back. So, I don't know, Brian, have you received anything? You know, so I don't believe any other village board member has, so. And again, this was noticed to what's the requirement, how many feet away from the property? So it would include a lot of these residents, right? For the public hearing notice. So yeah, they could have been here to express a concern about parking. Other questions on what we discussed in the public hearing? Otherwise, you see the proposed motion there. Okay, I'll make a motion to recommend to the village board approval of the proposed ordinance as drafted, amending the 2931 Union Street Plan Development District for the property located at 2931 Union Street, East Troy, Wisconsin 53120, RA 502100002, subject to the 3 conditions listed in the packet.
Second.
All right, motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it. Have a good night. Oops. All right, moving on to miscellaneous business. Item 1, change the color of the cornices and ornate wood brackets on all 4 facades of the East Troy Brewery building located at 2905 Main Street. Lance Rosenmayer, East Troy Holdings, LLC, applicant, application 2025-17. This is discussion and possible action by the Plan Commission. Warren.
This is the first one of these. Get my microphone on. This is the first one of these downtown design applications that I've had the pleasure to review. So one of the things I tried to do in this case was just go and look at some of the various buildings in the downtown and how their exteriors look. When we look at this process, there are different processes for something that's new versus something that's being renovated. So we would be on the downtown design renovation portion of the review and approval process. So that includes painting and changing the color. So in this case, the request is to repaint a portion of the cornices and the decorative brackets on all 4 elevations of the East Troy Brewery. The color that is currently in those areas is white, and the proposed color would be this Sherwin-Williams iron ore 7069, which would match the brick at the base of the building. According to the property owner, and he's trying to just add some pop, some interest to the top of the building to make it stand out a little more. And there is a portion of the building that I just went out and looked at before the meeting that was painted. It's in the packets. It would be kind of on the, would that be the west side, Lance? Okay. Yep, southwest back corner. There's a little portion that was painted just to, just to sample and see. Yeah, it is in one of the pictures. Yep, there you go. You can see the 3 brackets that have been painted and then the trim. So that's what's being contemplated. It would be carried around, again, all 4 elevations of the top portion of the building, and then the top piece of trim would be painted on the lower portion of the building all the way around as well. There are no brackets on the lower portion. So there's a code section that I've included regarding exterior colors and some of the things to consider. Some of the language says shall be compatible and harmonious with those of existing buildings in the immediate area, which conform to the overall design theme. So again, that's why I included some of the images of other buildings and their architectural features, you know, the ones that have decorative brackets like this and what the color schemes of those look like, just to provide some examples of what's being done around the square. In some of those instances, there has been color added to the decorative brackets, like the building on 2094 to 2096 Church Street, or the building at 2878 Main Street, you know, the saloon there on the corner. In other instances, the brackets were left white and the background was painted. You know, there's a band that gets painted a certain color. That would be the case with the Realty Executives building at 2887 Main Street, or the at 2880 Main Street. And in some cases, it's all white, like with the 2894 Main Street building. So again, I tried to include a lot of examples just so you could see what's going on around the square. I tried to locate a previously approved elevation, and what I found, I don't know is if it's 100% what's out there today, but I did find one from 2018 that had been approved. That's close. It very closely matches what's out there. There's a different color on the top of the building than what's shown, but it does show the cornices and you can't really see the bracket detail on that elevation, but it's close to what was approved out there. So again, property owners here, if there's specific questions, if the Plan Commission has questions for me, I'd be happy to help try to answer those.
Lance, anything you want to add?
No, I think, Orin covered it pretty well. We're trying to do is get the building to pop a little more. It's a little bland to us, and we're trying to say, you know, come over here, look at us, and just make this a little more pretty on top.
Questions for Lance or for Warren? And you're good with, there's 2 conditions here in Warren's report. You're good with those?
And the 2 conditions were what?
You'll satisfy all, it's kind of general stuff. You'll satisfy all the comments, conditions, concerns.
Yes.
And the reimbursement piece here if we had to do something.
Correct. I read that already, yes. I'm good with those.
Yep, all right. This doesn't go to the board, right? This is just our approval.
Yep, this is the Plan Commission's purview.
Okay.
You all get to decide what's appropriate and either approve with conditions, or deny.
Okay. I'll move approval of the renovation request for Lance Rosenmayer, East Troy Holdings LLC, to change the color of the cornices and decorative brackets on all 4 elevations of the East Troy Brewery building located at 2905 Main Street, subject to conditions 1 and 2 in the packet.
Second.
Questions or discussion on the motion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Lance.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for investing in the community. Have a good night. Oops. Not what I wanted to do. All right. Item 2, discussion related to tiny homes as accessory units in residential zoning districts. Warren.
So in your packets, you have a memo. I did some digging into American Planning Association documents that were available regarding the topic of tiny homes. The summary of my findings is that there's not really a formal definition of what this includes. It's generally considered to be a single-family dwelling, 400 square feet or less. And that could be something that's on a foundation or something that's on a chassis and mobile. It varies. The pictures that I provided on the first page of my memo, you've got on the left one that would be mobile and mounted on a chassis. On the right, you've got one that's fixed to a foundation. And then in the middle, you've got one of these tiny home villages, and that would be an example from the one in Racine, which I talk about a little later on in my memo. So there's certain things that can be barriers to these. It could be, a zoning-related barrier. It could be a building or fire code issue. If there are certain requirements for a square footage, a minimum of habitable space per person, that could be something that's a potential limit to something like this. I reached out to the building inspector, and he wasn't aware of anything from the Wisconsin Building Code that would be a hindrance to this. I think the fire code would have to be looked at as well, because I think they do have occupancy limitations, and they may have something. So that would be worth looking into. But for comparison purposes, what I looked at was in the zoning code, what's allowed today. So the baseline would be single-family home. The minimum gross floor area requirement for that in the village currently is 1,000 square feet. And so if you're going to build a house in one of our residential districts, it's got to be at least 1,000 square feet. We do allow accessory dwelling units as an accessory use, and the accessory dwelling unit shall not exceed 75% of the principal dwelling's floor area up to a maximum size of 700 square feet. So you could technically have a accessory dwelling unit currently that is 400 square feet, because if 400 square feet doesn't exceed 75% of the home, and that is definitely under 700 square feet, you could do that today with the existing code language. The thing about accessory dwelling units is that they don't have to be a detached structure. That could be something that's, above a garage. It could be an attic of a dwelling. It could be the basement of a dwelling. There's a lot of different ways that something could be an accessory dwelling unit, but it could also be detached, and it could be, in our code's case, it would have to be something that was on a foundation. The only place that allows for the chassis-mounted mobile-type dwellings would be our mobile home district, which is one property in the village that has that. The other thing that I looked at would be the cottage housing portion of the code, which is something that allows dwelling units as small as 650 square feet. So again, that's not quite getting to the tiny home size, but it is quite a compromise from the 1,000 square foot for the single-family residence. That was something that was added in the recent past, and is kind of a best planning practice for providing different housing types. And the part of the code that it's in, it's referred to as an alternative development option. And in those cases, you're basically just allowing a greater density of these smaller single-family units. It could be a cottage court where they're all kind of laid out around a cul-de-sac or something, a small street, or they could just be on a property that has different frontages and there's a lot of different ways these could be laid out. The example from Green Bay of the tiny home community was described as both a tiny home village and a cottage court style development. And so I think the difference between the two tiny home villages between Racine and Green Bay, again, these are both for veterans and to try to address homelessness amongst the veteran populations in these communities. And these are both run by nonprofit organizations. So there's a non-governmental, entity who's overseeing these efforts. The Racine one is a little more dense and on a smaller piece of property, and the Green Bay one is in more of a institutional setting. It was near a mental health facility that was owned by the county, and the county donated the land, and so there's a little more space near that one. So as far as the comprehensive plan and what that calls for and how these would fit into the village, there is a objective in the, well, there's a goal to provide a variety of housing types. And so I think the village has consistently done a good job of going back and looking at what's going on with housing in the county, and then what the code is, what the limitations of the code are for housing, and tweaking that. And so that can be evidenced by the previous amendments to allow accessory dwelling units and the cottage housing as an alternative development option. So do I think there is a need for this in the community? I don't, because we don't see a lot of people utilizing the current allowed accessory dwelling unit portion of the code. The one instance that I've had since I've been on board as your planner is an existing accessory dwelling unit that was a non-conforming situation, that somebody converted a carriage house into a dwelling unit, and the village ended up approving it, and it was before this standard was developed for these accessory dwelling units. One of the things that we talk about as planners are barriers to these and how to make them easier for folks to do. One of the current barriers is probably financing. If you're gonna do one of these, if you're gonna build another dwelling unit on your lot, you're gonna have to probably get a mortgage and go through a bank for most folks. Some folks could probably do it on their own without that, but it's a significant investment even for a smaller structure, because you still have to go through all of the same code issues, get all the same permits and approvals, and have, contractors out to do their various components of the project. So it's not a cheap endeavor, even if it's a smaller version of a home. But that financing portion can be tricky. They've only done a few of them in my own community, and they've had it on the books even longer, allowing for them. So because that piece is there and the cottage court component is there, and we're not seeing those utilized yet, I don't know that there's necessarily a need to go and change the code to allow something even smaller. In the case of the two tiny home communities, again, those were both specifically targeted towards veterans and providing homeless veterans with housing options and kind of upward mobility to get them self-sufficient.
So I was going to say, I think you answered part of my question, which was on the chassis piece, that like, if we went down this path, I would not be in favor of allowing it on a chassis. Want it fixed. Can you go back to the original three pictures there on, I think on page 1? Yeah, like something on the right. Something that's what I think we ought to be aiming for. The other question I was going to ask is, for those developments that you referred in Green Bay and Racine, are they owners or are they renting from one of these NGOs?
I believe they're renting. I think the NGOs own the property and the buildings.
And so I think that, like, that's my concern with, like, the chassis piece or any type of those developments is, you know, with housing prices today, it's really difficult for somebody to come in and build equity in something that they own, right? There's no starter home. Like, the only houses that are being built right now in East Troy are $550,000 plus, right? There's no, I just graduated college, let me go, you know, buy a house. There's no, that's not feasible right now. So I think whether we do this now or this is a need maybe we have from a developer, if we do TID 6 or a developer comes in with what we're about to hear about in a few minutes, I kind of agree with you. I think going below, what was it, 650 square? Yeah.
50 is the cottage.
I think that would be, it'd be like, what are we trying to do here and why are, you know, and
Well, and like I pointed out, you can do that on a foundation as a detached accessory dwelling unit, and that would be allowed currently.
but that's already on a residential lot with an existing development on it,
Correct.
right? So,
Correct.
you know, but I bought a field and I'm gonna pack them full of 400, you know, I'm gonna develop this field into now a community, and instead of a single-family subdivision, I'm gonna put in,
The
bunch
the
of
example
tiny
I
houses.
found of that type of development, in Colorado, there's a few communities that have adopted code language to allow for that because they have a manufacturer in Colorado that makes these tiny homes and is promoting these tiny home communities that are, you know, owner-occupied units that they set up, and they have common element features for the community, so that there's a little value added there. So they're doing subdivisions, if you will, quote unquote, of these tiny homes. But again, Colorado and maybe a Texas example, but those were the best I could find of places that are doing something like that aren't a non-government organization like the nonprofits in Wisconsin examples I provided.
and I could see too, like if you had, you know, a lake or something that had not been developed for some reason, you know, and you wanted to have something like, you know, but yeah, I don't know. What do you guys think? I mean, are you guys inclined to want to try to change the ordinance, or is this a solution in search of a problem right now?
Just a couple questions, but I think to answer yours, I think I'm good the way it is. But, so the difference between the cottage housing and the tiny homes is just the size of it, correct? And how it's mounted on the ground, basically.
Yeah, basically the idea with the cottage housing is to have a cluster of smaller units, and it could be a condominium situation where, you know, you would still own the unit, but there'd be common element, you know, land around you. And it's just a way to get density and provide a redevelopment opportunity for certain targeted properties in a community. Again, the accessory dwelling unit option is currently available to many of our residential zoning districts. It's a conditional use, and there are specific standards. It would have to be on a foundation if it was going to be a detached dwelling unit, and there would be certain setback requirements. And again, there's a size limitation on it, but it's a maximum, not a minimum. And so you can't exceed 750 square feet. You could go smaller, though.
And since you said we have something on the books on cottage housing, if we took tiny homes a case at a time without making a broad ordinance about them, we'd be covered then.
Well, if somebody was interested in it, they could propose it as a detached accessory dwelling unit through those standards. Yeah, if somebody had a raw piece of land that didn't have a home on it, and they said they wanted to build a new tiny home, you know, the standard is currently a minimum of 1,000 square feet for just a regular, single-family zone property that somebody wants to build a new home on.
But could someone have a piece of land and say, I want to put a cottage house on it, and that's it?
The cottage housing is intended to be a planned development that has multiple units, not just one. Yep. And again, if you wanted to do the accessory dwelling unit, it has to be accessory to an existing dwelling unit, so you'd have to have an existing house.
I like the idea of it being an accessory structure for like families to age. Like if your father-in-law moves in the back, they're then selling their house, which is opening an entire house so that they can have a home that's close to family and safe. The thought of having an entire community of that, I think that's a solution looking for a problem.
I'd say keep as it is until there's an issue, then we'll address it at the time.
And I think on the cottage piece, did we get some feedback, Eileen, that a developer was going to suggest some changes there? I can't remember.
We had a developer that actually, Pam with Wasita, who's here, had connected me with John Tracy. And he wasn't really looking to develop a cottage housing development here in East Troy. He just reviewed it for us to give us feedback. One of his comments was he felt the green space requirements made it a little bit difficult from a financial perspective. But I have shared it with other developers, haven't really gotten much feedback. I haven't felt like there's been a ton of interest in it. Even though I've asked other developers for feedback, I really haven't truly gotten feedback. John Tracy was the only one. So I don't know if there's really a level of interest in that type of development or not.
All right, I think the consensus here is this is useful to have done, the research, in case we have a developer come along and wants to talk about it. We kind of have more there, so thank you. But I think we'll just leave the code as is for now.
Yeah, and if we do get more interest in this, we can look at, again, specific ordinance language from other communities that have, allowed these in a greater capacity than the accessory dwelling unit style. And we can review those at that time in greater detail.
All right. Then we'll move on. Item 3, Village of East Troy Housing Development Opportunity Analysis Discussion Recommendation to the Village Board. We have some guests from Wasita here.
I don't think they were planning on presenting. They just came
Oh,
to
for
listen,
questions.
so.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead,
Sorry, I
Eileen.
didn't mean to put you guys on the spot. So I had given a little bit of background in my memo. I'll, just in a nutshell, Wasita was tasked with addressing the housing shortage and issues for Walworth County. They've been working with municipalities on how to address some of the housing needs. Last year, Pam, who's here, had approached me and asked if the village would be willing to participate in a housing analysis. They performed this for 2 municipalities in Walworth County, so we were kind of like a test case to see how it worked out. From my perspective, I really appreciate doing something like this because one of the things that I'm always challenged with when I'm working with developers is knowing whether or not this is something the Plan Commission and the Village Board will support. I think that also gives developers a great level of comfort if they know it's properties that have been identified as potential residential developments. So they're not wasting their time and efforts and money looking into properties that might go nowhere. So I wanted to have the Plan Commission review this analysis, give us feedback if there are any, is there anything that's really concerning? Is it generally acceptable? This, of course, is not stating you're approving a specific development on a property, just that you are generally in agreement with the properties they've identified. I did point out in my memo, we haven't talked to the specific property owners, so I want to be very clear about that. There are properties on here where the property owners may not be prepared to sell the properties. That would be up to the developers to approach the property owners and work through that with them. So reviewing the analysis, they had given a bunch of background. I am not going to go into detail. I'm sure you guys have reviewed this. I did meet at one point with staff from Vanderwall, who performed the study. Waseda had contracted with them to do this and gave them some feedback as well. Then I did circulate it after receiving it to Orrin, and I also, there was, I think, Matt, I had you take a look at it just to get some general comments as well. Orrin, you had pointed out there were a couple properties not included that had been identified for residential development. Was that in the future land use map they were identified for? So those were not included. I was not able to speak with a staff member by that point in time who had done the analysis because she is on a leave of absence. So if that is a true concern at this point, we'll have to wait until she returns. I'm not sure if she was looking at it from a perspective of utility availability and those type of things, like, what's feasible in the near future versus what's feasible in the long term. So on that map, they had identified sites. They gave a lot of detail in that table of the sites and what some of the potential paths for a potential development would be. Some of them do require annexation. Some would require a rezoning. And then this map identifies the properties. So I'm going to open it up for any kind of comments, questions, concerns that the Plan Commission may have.
When it talks about housing, is it talking about single-family houses or apartment complexes?
If you look at the map that I have up, they had identified different types of suitable developments for the parcels. So the yellow ones are single-family. So you see those. And then the brown ones are mixed residential, which could be apartments. It could be a mixture. You'll recall for the CMERT site, that stands for the Crucible Materials Environmental Response Trust, we actually did review some conceptual plans that Vanderwall had done for that site. And those were mixed types of residential dwellings. So it wasn't a very large apartment complex, but it actually had a senior housing complex and then some fourplexes and a mixture of different densities for housing. So that's what that mixed residential stands for. And then the orange is planned neighborhood. And in our comp plan, I believe, Orrin, correct me if I'm wrong on this, the planned neighborhood would allow for the two-family residential style development.
It would be a mix of different residential styles, so it could be traditional single-family subdivision that has a mix of two-family included in with that, and it could potentially have other types of residential development as well. The goal would be to have a diverse mix of different housing types and different income levels. That would be ideal.
Okay. And some of the members here were involved when we just did our most recent comprehensive plan update. Those members who were involved in that may recall one of the goals that the Plan Commission had was, even in single-family neighborhoods, to consider some side-by-sides, like on corner lots and things like that. So we are already considering those type of styles of developments.
Well, and we made our change to the land use plan to make it a little easier to do duplexes in and around the downtown. If you remember, we changed the land use category, and now you can do, it's just single family and two family for those areas, specifically in and around the downtown. Eileen, I just wanted to add that one of the things that we asked of Vanderwall, originally the criteria for this was to exclude parcels that were under an acre in size. But because this is something that's going to be proactively given to developers, think of this as a placemat that you would slide across at a meeting with a potential developer. We wanted to make sure that the vacant parcels on the square downtown got highlighted in this as well, because from a community standpoint, any type of residential development in the downtown kind of carries more bang for the buck for the community. And so even though those are smaller sites, we wanted to make sure that they got highlighted on here. So that change was made. They were gracious enough to do that.
I think just from some of the conversations, right where you have your mouse there for that orange piece there, I thought that was a great find because to keep contiguousness that's coming off the school property right there. Those properties that due north of the school are an environmental corridor, so they're deed restricted. So they can't be developed. Thoughts or questions?
So if you go back to your bar chart or bar graph, whatever you call it, so the red, is that what we currently have, or is that what we need by 2030? Or 2030, I think it is. And then the yellow is the demand by 2050, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so my general question, just out of curiosity, is, I know it's a big question, but how are these numbers, how do you come up with these numbers?
I believe this was prepared by Southeastern Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission.
It was, correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's Serepac. And so when we had that joint, was that last year, last spring?
The summit or the joint
Yeah.
meeting with the board and the plan commission,
Yeah.
that was in March of '24.
Okay, so that graph is in there, and there's some other graphs that show what our actual, so we're not at that red line there for 2030, and definitely not anywhere close for the 2050 line. So there's some other graphs in that report that show where we are as I think we're short by what? It's a few hundred units.
Pam, do you happen to recall? I don't want to put you on the spot, but
So can I, Pam, you said the numbers are outdated. You would expect these numbers the graphs to go more to the right? Yeah, so this demand is on the conservative side. Okay, thank you.
And I'll add too, currently we have one single-family residential subdivision under construction in the village, and they're averaging about 6 units a year. So, and, you know, we point to that pricing a lot. They are selling them. I have been told that developers not as focused on single-family anymore. I don't know if that's true. That's hearsay. But that's currently not meeting the needs of the area either. I mean, 6 single-family houses a year is pretty slim. And that price point, we were hoping to get some lower price points for housing. That's what the county and the state have identified as a real issue, and we all know it's an issue. And whatever you refer to it as, missing middle, however you want to say it, it's very difficult for individuals starting out just out of college, as President Johnson had pointed out. But it's also difficult for people who are working professional jobs, such as teachers, firefighters, police officers. I mean, these are public servants, and they're having a difficult time at their income level being able to afford housing. We all know what's happened with housing prices, so I don't have to explain that to you. So those are some of the goals that we're trying to identify. I know there's some challenges with developers as well. The infrastructure is very expensive. It's hard for them to cash flow developments right now. So getting the development is challenging. We're not the only community that's been challenged with that. That's a very common theme. But I'm looking at this as a tool to have those conversations with the developers. So far, when I've had conversations, I'm sending them a hodgepodge of, information about properties and things. And as I had stated, I think, for me, just having that backing, knowing that you've looked at these properties and you're comfortable with what I am giving these developers, or if Pam's working with the developers, she can share it with them. For brokers working with the developer, we're all sharing the same thing that has been reviewed by our Plan Commission and board. So that's the purpose of it.
But I mean, we could hit these numbers at 2050, And if no one can afford the housing, then it really doesn't matter too much, correct? I mean, the pricing is pricing more of an issue than actual structures?
I think it's a combination, because if you don't have the supply, it drives the prices up. So if we have less supply, it's going to continue to drive price. I mean, obviously, there's other economic factors, but you can charge way more for a house when there's very few units available.
So on the topic of pricing, just to give the plan commissioners an idea of what is currently being considered affordable, I'll use the Washington County Next Generation Housing Program as an example. Their goal is to create a certain number of new units in certain price points, and they're looking at 40% sold under $340,000, 80% sold under $360,000, and 100% sold under $420,000. So they've got a townhome apartment style product that's going for 319. It's townhome, but owner occupied. So 319,000 for that. That's being built in Jackson, just as an example of what's being considered affordable. So it's higher than you would think.
And is that being done under a TID?
They've got different mechanisms. So I think the village of Jackson had land that they donated for a specific area, and Harbor Homes, which is Newman Development, is doing the single-family portion and some side-by-side units in part of that Jackson development. And then another developer, Hillcrest Builders, out of Sheboygan County, is doing some side-by-side townhome-style units. And then there's another separate property that's doing townhome-style that wasn't part of this village-owned parcel. So that's one way that community in Jackson actively tried to bring in some affordable housing, was by providing the land.
Is this the Oaks of Jackson?
That's the example that I'm giving, yeah.
Yeah, that's also in the March packet, if anybody wants to go back and look at that.
Yep, so it's that county's program, again, where I'm quoting these dollar figures just to give you an idea of what is being considered to be affordable
Yeah, so it was
nowadays.
it was a 20-acre site, 40 single-family homes, 4 twin homes, 13 rear-loaded single-family homes, 40 townhomes. And it's multiple, like you said, multiple builders, so.
Yep, so the single family and the twin homes are built. None of the townhome products have been built yet. But again, this other developer from West Bend is doing a townhome style development on a different parcel that's kind of back behind their hardware store, which is near where this other Oaks development is, and that product is partially built. So if anybody wanted to go see those are available to look at.
What do you all think about the map and the report? Any other feedback or questions for Wasita?
Oh, I guess the only question I have is, I know you guys are marketing these properties or whatever, but let's say one of us found a person that'd be interested in developing a property, just tell them to come to you guys, or?
I mean, we're not specifically marketing the properties, they're not our properties. So it's really just to share with somebody who might want to develop and say, these are potential properties that, we've reviewed, we think they'd be suitable for this style development. Then they can propose something to the village and, propose something to the property owner to acquire the property. So it's really just a tool. So you could hand it to somebody and say, yeah, the village has reviewed this. And they certainly can reach out to me, but it's not us doing the marketing. It's,
Okay.
Yeah.
But I think, let's say one of these property owners is interested in selling, probably a contingency on that deal is that, let's say it needs to be annexed in, that the village will annex it in and the zoning will be approved for what we're trying to do. And what we're trying to say here is, this is directionally where we want to go. So if, let's take the one in orange there, I want to come in there and I want to fill that whole thing with high-density, apartments. No, that's not what that says. That wasn't the direction that we were thinking that this would go. And, so so no, you're probably not going to get that zoning, right? So that's try to protect the developer a bit when they go, yeah, I'm going to buy this property, and the seller, that, yeah, we're not going to then drag our feet on something that we've already kind of said, yeah, that's what we want to do. All right. Thank you both. I do have a question for you, Derek, if you wait 2 minutes. All right. I think that was.
It said recommendation to the board.
Oh, there's a recommendation to the board. I'm sorry. So I guess I'll move to recommend this to the village board.
I'll second it.
All right. Questions or discussion on that motion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right. Recommendation for future agenda, revise application requirements for rezoning petitions. Is there anything in there that we've gotten pushback on, or that we have a high priority on?
I was gonna ask what, if anybody recalled what specifically, I can go back and look at, Tim's got some notes on certain things and some of the materials that I've gotten from him, but I don't know specifically what about the applications was in need of revising, but I can do some digging.
I guess my question for you, whether you see something in Tim's notes, but, because you've been our administrator now for how long? A year?
Over a year. Yeah,
Over a
over a
year?
year.
Yeah. I mean, whether it's these or anything else that you review, like, hey, so I've been doing this for a year, you saw the first one for the square tonight, if you've got thoughts or feedback, like, I would recommend that you guys clean this up or make this change or whatever. Maybe that might be a part of something like this. But if there's nothing in Tim's notes, or there's nothing specific that I know of that jumps out at me, I don't know about the rest of the commission.
Okay, I'll see if I find anything, and
Okay.
I'll report back with something if I do.
All right, next meeting, September 8th, 2025 at 6:30 if needed. I will move to adjourn. All those in favor? Aye, we are adjourned. Thank you very much. Have a good night.